Have you ever wondered what it truly means to witness the end of an era? On September 8th, 2022, the world watched as the longest reigning monarch in British history drew her final breath, marking not just the end of a life, but the conclusion of a golden age of royalty that will never return. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor didn't just wear a crown. She embodied an empire, survived world wars, and transformed a crumbling monarchy into a symbol of unwavering stability. Yet behind the carefully orchestrated public image lay a woman whose private struggles, controversial decisions, and moments of vulnerability would shape the very future of the British throne. This is the extraordinary story of Queen Elizabeth II, the last great monarch whose 7-decade reign witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of the modern world, and the gradual decline of royal influence across the globe. From a young princess who never expected to rule, to the dignified sovereign who navigated her nation through its darkest hours and greatest triumphs, her legacy remains both celebrated and scrutinized. But what made her truly great wasn't just her longevity. It was her ability to adapt, endure, and maintain the delicate balance between tradition and progress in an ever-changing world. Elizabeth was born on April 21st, 1926, into a world vastly different from the one she would eventually rule. Her father, Albert, Duke of York, was the second son of King George V, which meant young Elizabeth was never destined for the throne. She was third in line, behind her uncle David, the Prince of Wales, and any future children he might have. The little princess enjoyed a relatively sheltered childhood, educated privately alongside her younger sister Margaret, learning languages, history, and the refined arts expected of a royal lady. Her early years were filled with horses, dogs, and the comfortable routine of aristocratic life, far removed from the heavy burden of kingship that would soon fall upon her shoulders. Everything changed in 1936 when Elizabeth was just 10 years old. Her uncle, now King Edward VIII, shocked the nation and the empire by abdicating the throne to marry American divorcee Wallis Simpson. The constitutional crisis that followed sent ripples throughout the British establishment, forcing Elizabeth's reluctant father to assume the crown as King George VI. Suddenly, the young princess found herself heir presumptive to the British throne, her carefree childhood replaced by the sobering reality of future responsibility. The transformation was immediate and profound. Elizabeth's education took on new urgency, with constitutional law, politics, and statecraft added to her curriculum. She began accompanying her parents on official duties, learning the intricate protocols and ceremonies that would define her future role. Yet even as she prepared for her destiny, the world around her was descending into chaos. The storm clouds of war were gathering across Europe, and soon the British Empire would face its greatest test. When World War II erupted in 1939, 13-year-old Elizabeth experienced the conflict alongside her subjects. The royal family remained in London throughout the Blitz, refusing to seek safety in Canada, as some advisors suggested. The young princess witnessed firsthand the destruction of her capital, the courage of ordinary people under extraordinary circumstances, and the vital importance of visible leadership during national crisis. These formative experiences would shape her understanding of duty and sacrifice for the rest of her reign. As the war progressed, Elizabeth's determination to serve became increasingly apparent. Against initial resistance from her father and government officials, she insisted on contributing to the war effort in a meaningful way. In 1945, at age 18, she finally convinced them to let her join the Auxiliary Territorial Service, where she trained as a driver and mechanic. For the first time in her life, the future queen worked alongside ordinary women, learning practical skills and experiencing something approaching normal life. The war years also brought romance into Elizabeth's life through her growing relationship with Philip Mountbatten, a dashing naval officer and distant cousin. Their courtship unfolded against the backdrop of a world at war, with Philip serving in the Royal Navy while Elizabeth remained devoted to her duties at home. Despite the 16-year age gap between them and concerns from some quarters about Philip's foreign birth and relatively modest royal connections, their bond deepened through years of correspondence and stolen moments together during his leave. The young couple's relationship faced intense scrutiny from both the press and the royal establishment. Philip's sisters had married German aristocrats, creating uncomfortable political complications during wartime, while his outspoken nature and irreverent humour clashed with the stuffy protocols of the British court. Yet Elizabeth remained steadfast in her affection, demonstrating early the same unwavering loyalty that would later define her reign. Their engagement was announced in July 1947, followed by a spectacular wedding in Westminster Abbey that November, providing a much-needed moment of celebration for a war-weary nation. Marriage brought new challenges and adjustments for the future Queen. Philip's naval career meant extended separations, while Elizabeth continued her preparation for eventual succession under her father's increasingly fragile health. The stress of wartime leadership and a lifetime of heavy smoking had taken a severe toll on King George VI, though the full extent of his illness remained carefully hidden from the public. Behind palace walls, the royal family grappled with the sobering reality that Elizabeth's accession might come sooner than anyone had anticipated. The birth of Prince Charles in 1948, followed by Princess Anne in 1950, brought joy but also new complexities to Elizabeth's life. Balancing motherhood with royal duties proved challenging, particularly as her father's health continued to deteriorate. She found herself increasingly called upon to represent the crown at official functions, state visits, and ceremonial occasions, gradually assuming more responsibilities while still officially heir presumptive rather than reigning monarch. By 1951, the king's condition had worsened dramatically, though this remained a closely guarded secret. Elizabeth began undertaking major tours and state visits on his behalf, including a planned tour of the Commonwealth that would take her to Kenya, Australia, and New Zealand. The weight of impending responsibility pressed heavily upon her shoulders as she prepared to represent not just Britain, but the entire Commonwealth realm on the global stage. It was during this Commonwealth tour that destiny finally called. On February 6, 1952, while staying at a remote game lodge in Kenya called Treetops, Elizabeth received the devastating news that her father had died peacefully in his sleep at Sandringham House. At just 25 years old, she had become Queen Elizabeth II, sovereign of the United Kingdom and head of the Commonwealth, responsible for the welfare of hundreds of millions of subjects across the globe. The moment of transition was both profound and surreal. One moment she was a young mother enjoying wildlife photography in the African bush. The next she was the most powerful monarch on earth. Philip was tasked with delivering the news, a conversation that would forever mark the end of their relatively normal married life and the beginning of a reign that would span 7 decades. The carefree young woman who had climbed into the treetops the previous evening descended as a queen, carrying the full weight of centuries of tradition and expectation. Her immediate return to London revealed a nation in mourning, but also one looking toward its young monarch with hope and anticipation. The sight of the composed, dignified figure emerging from the aircraft in black mourning dress captured the public imagination and established the image of quiet strength that would define her entire reign. From that moment at Treetops in 1952 to her final breath 70 years later, Elizabeth II embodied something increasingly rare in our modern world: absolute dedication to duty above personal desire. She witnessed the dissolution of the British Empire, navigated countless political crises, weathered family scandals, and adapted an ancient institution to the demands of the 21st century. Through it all, she maintained the same quiet dignity that marked her emergence as queen in the Kenyan wilderness. What truly made Elizabeth the last great monarch wasn't simply her longevity or the dramatic events she witnessed, but her unwavering commitment to service in an age of self-interest. She understood that the crown was not a privilege to be enjoyed, but a burden to be carried, not a platform for personal expression, but a symbol of continuity and stability. In a world where politicians chase popularity and celebrities seek attention, she chose instead the harder path of silent duty and selfless sacrifice. Her death marked more than the passing of Britain's longest-serving sovereign. It signalled the end of an era when monarchy truly mattered on the global stage. Future monarchs will rule over a vastly different world, one where royal influence continues to diminish and public deference can no longer be assumed. Elizabeth II was the final monarch to command genuine respect and affection across the Commonwealth, making her not just Britain's last great queen, but perhaps the last great monarch the world will ever know.